The suitcase, the silence, and the shepherd who wouldn't move. Airports are built on routine, lines, schedules, protocol. Everything that makes you feel like nothing ever truly goes wrong, until something does. It started with a single suitcase and a canine officer who didn't move, not even when handlers tugged, not when the diplomat protested, because something in that case reeked of death, not just animal death. The world would later call it a miracle, but those closest knew it was instinct and trust. Behind those wheels and zippers were frozen amphibians, forged identities, and vials so toxic a drop could kill a room. But you'll never see Coda on a podium. He didn't bark, he just stayed. And in that silence, a story was born. One that stretches across borders, into embassies, and ends with a simple truth. Sometimes the best trained machines miss what a good dog sees. The fluorescent lights of Orion International Airport flickered faintly as they hummed overhead, casting a sterile glow onto the polished terrazzo floors of Terminal C. Outside, the wind howled low like some distant animal, dragging needles of snow across the dark tarmac. The season's first true blizzard was clawing its way across the East Coast, and though the terminal remained warm and lit, everyone inside moved with the quiet urgency of people who sensed something bigger pressing in from the outside. Officer Amara Jensen adjusted the collar of her Port Authority K9 jacket, the navy blue fabric still holding the cold from her short walk across the loading zone. Snowflakes clung to her shoulders, melting into dark circles. She exhaled through her nose, a slow breath that curled in the air like steam before vanishing. Her hazel eyes flicked over the early travelers filtering through security, faces buried in scarves, fingers red with cold, pulling roller bags through the gleaming concourse. She didn't smile. She rarely did anymore. Beside her, Coda, a Dutch shepherd, with a dark, brindled coat like brushed steel, sat at attention. His posture was perfect, his body alert, but at ease, a sculpture of muscle and trained instinct. The only sign of life was the constant flick of his ears, attuned to every movement, every breath, every inconsistency in the noise around them. His harness bore the bright yellow letters K9 Unit, but even without the label, people gave them space. There was something in the dog's eyes, intelligent, quiet, assessing, that made most instinctively step aside. The terminal was already half awake despite the hour. Overpriced coffee shops blinked to life, pushing out bitter steam and half-hearted Christmas music. Intercoms crackled overhead. Flight updates, security reminders, a gentle but constant digital murmur of modern travel. Somewhere near Gate 4, a child cried. A janitor's cart squeaked as it passed. The world moved forward, oblivious to the fact that something was already beginning to unravel. Amara checked her watch. 4:58 a.m., another long shift ahead. The cold in her bones told her it was going to be the kind of day that left you changed. She reached down and tapped Coda's flank. "Easy, boy," she said quietly. Her voice was low, nearly swallowed by the background noise. But Coda's eyes lifted to her face, ears twitching forward, catching everything. She always spoke to him like that, measured, calm, no unnecessary commands. Words were mostly for her. Coda read breath, posture, tone. In the field, he didn't need orders. He just needed her to be certain. There was a time Amara wasn't so measured. Before Kandahar. Before the dust and the fire and the moment that still jerked her awake at night, hands clawing at phantom shrapnel. That was another life one filled with noise and chaos and the blood of a handler who hadn't come back. She rubbed the scar on the inside of her wrist unconsciously, the reminder always there under the glove. "Jensen," came a voice behind her. She turned to see Ridley, her supervisor, approaching with his usual look of functional exhaustion. His black winter coat was half-zipped, tie crooked, eyes rimmed in red. He carried a clipboard in one hand, a half-eaten protein bar in the other. "Briefing's in 10, room B2. Bring the mutt," he said without breaking stride. Amara arched a brow. "He has a name." "I've got 3 kids and 5 dogs. You think I remember names?" he grunted. Then, more seriously, "Intel came in from Interpol an hour ago. You'll want to hear it." She gave a silent nod, and Coda stood immediately, falling into heel position without a word. They moved as one, like muscle and nerve. As they walked through the terminal toward the briefing room, Amara caught snippets of life. A man arguing softly in Russian on his phone, a flight attendant laughing a little too loudly, 2 teenagers asleep on their backpacks, faces lit blue by phone screens. It was a world in motion. And yet none of them would ever know how close they might come today to brushing against something dangerous, something wrong, hidden just beneath leather and smiles and diplomatic immunity. Coda's ears twitched again. Her eyes followed his line of attention but saw nothing out of place. Still her heartbeat shifted just slightly. He was rarely wrong. She reached down and gave a quiet tap to his harness. "Not yet," she murmured. "Soon." They continued on, boots clicking softly across marble, past polished storefronts and boarding gates full of strangers. The snow outside continued to fall in thick, lazy spirals. Somewhere beyond the terminal windows, the predator they were about to face was already setting pieces in motion, and Coda, loyal and silent at her side, would be the first to know. The briefing room beneath Terminal C didn't look like much gray walls, humming fluorescent lights, a few battered chairs, a coffee machine that hissed louder than it brewed. But within these walls, decisions were made that shaped what passed through Orion International Airport, and what didn't, what lived, what didn't. Officer Amara Jensen stood along the back wall, hands folded behind her back, Coda sitting perfectly at her left heel. His ears twitched at every creak, every sigh of a boot against linoleum. He didn't fidget. He didn't yawn. He waited, watching the room the way soldiers do when they've seen enough to know that stillness often comes before something breaks. Across the room, 4 other handlers with their canine partners filled the semicircle. German shepherds, a Belgian Malinois, even one massive black Labrador trained for explosive detection. Some of the dogs were younger, restless with the jittery energy of rookies. Coda didn't blink. His gaze was locked on the door. When it swung open, Security Supervisor Ridley entered like a gust of worn-out wind, carrying a binder tucked under one arm and a steaming mug in the other. His tie had a stain on it, something dark, probably coffee, and his glasses perched unevenly on the bridge of his nose. He dropped the binder on the table with a heavy thump. A few pages fluttered loose like exhausted confessions. "All right, listen up," Ridley said, rubbing a hand over his face. "Interpol's dropped something on our laps this morning, and it's not a small-time job. We're talking organized, transnational, and deep-pocketed." He clicked a button on the monitor behind him. The screen blinked to life, showing a still frame from a customs raid in Frankfurt, rows of sedated reptiles inside clear, vacuum-sealed cases, their limp bodies lined like specimens, not lives. "Wildlife trafficking," Ridley said. "Top tier, rare exotics, live cargo. Estimated market value of this shipment alone? North of $10 million. That's just street value." One of the younger officers exhaled low. Even the dogs seemed to still. Word is, this network's been moving endangered species using diplomatic cover, legitimate-looking documents, diplomatic pouches, immunity loopholes, stuff that makes it hard to inspect without raising political hell. Ridley turned to a new slide. A map of red thread lines stretching from Southeast Asia to multiple East Coast airports. They've moved through Heathrow, Istanbul, Singapore. Now intel says a transfer is scheduled somewhere in the Northeast. Could be here. Could be Philly. But if they're smart, and they are, it's us. We've got the biggest passenger volume and the most fragmented jurisdiction. He sipped from his mug, wincing at the taste. Here's what you're watching for. Diplomatic pouches that don't pass the smell test. Luxury, luggage, think high-end Italian, minimalist brands. Anything coming in from Southeast Asia, Central Africa, or the Gulf states. And keep an eye on the body language. These guys won't sweat like drug mules, but they'll watch exits, scan faces, overcompensate with charm. You know the type. He paused, eyes scanning the room. They landed on Coda for a breath longer than necessary. And if your dog alerts, you push it. Protocol be damned. You escalate through me. There was a beat of silence, unspoken but understood. They were being given rare leeway. Ridley's voice dropped a note. Look, I've been in this job 23 years. I've seen narcotics, explosives, human trafficking. But the way these bastards move living, breathing animals like contraband, stuff that doesn't make it out of the suitcase half the time, that's a different kind of rot. Amara felt her jaw tighten. She didn't need more convincing. Coda's eyes hadn't moved from the door once. "Any questions?" Ridley asked. "None. Just dogs breathing, handlers thinking." "Good. Patrols rotate on standard perimeter routes, but we're adding a shadow pattern today. K-9 units to mirror arriving flights at customs. Jensen, you're on priority flag for Gate D and arrivals from Dubai and Jakarta. There's a sweep request for Gate 12 in an hour. Go light, but go sharp." Amara nodded once. As the others filed out, conversations low, dogs pulling slightly at leashes with purpose, Amara lingered just long enough to catch Ridley's eye. He gave her a look that was less command and more warning. "If your partner picks up something, Jensen," he said, quieter now, "don't second-guess him. Not this time." Amara didn't answer. She didn't need to. They stepped back into the terminal's artificial glow, and the noise wrapped around them again: boarding calls, baby cries, espresso machines wheezing like steam engines. The sun had started to rise outside, but the snow had thickened, blurring the edges of the runways. Coda moved at her side with silent confidence. His paws barely made a sound on the floor, his eyes flicking from bag to person to gate sign, as if he were already piecing together the first hints of a pattern. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Amara's eyes swept the terminal with professional detachment, but inside, something had shifted. The weight of the briefing. The familiar tingle in her chest. What used to be called instinct, but had evolved over time into something quieter. Something like faith. Faith in her partner. They passed a business traveler wrestling a sleek black suitcase onto a cart. Coda's ears lifted, but he kept moving. Outside, the wind clawed at the glass. Inside, the hunt had begun. The luxury arrivals section of Terminal C hummed with quiet, elegance marble tiles, brass railings, muted lighting designed to soothe jet-lagged elites. A digital board flashed, "Emirates 684 arrived," and soon after, the first-class stream began to trickle through customs, their movements smooth and practiced like people who had done this 100 times. Amara Jensen stood just beyond the crowd, Coda steady at her side. Most people didn't notice them. That was by design. Their presence wasn't theatrical. It was quiet, intentional. Koda's harness was snug across his shoulders, the canine badge clipped neatly under his collar, his body relaxed but ready. Her hand rested lightly on his back as they moved with the current. She felt the rhythm of the terminal, the tempo of movement, the cadence of voices. Something was off, and Koda felt it too. At first, it was just the twitch of his ears, a subtle shift in posture, but Amara had worked with him long enough to recognize the change. His gait slowed not out of fatigue, but focus. His nose lifted into the air slightly, scenting the moving bodies, the heavy tang of jet fuel, and something else riding beneath it, something specific. "Koda," she said under her breath, more out of instinct than instruction. He moved again, veering gently left, deeper into the flow of disembarking passengers. Amara followed without question. They passed a woman juggling a Gucci tote and a poodle in a travel crate. A man in a Rolex hoodie tapping angrily at his phone. Koda ignored them all. He was tracking something. The moment they reached the premium baggage carousel, he froze. Amara stopped just behind him. Her eyes followed his line of focus straight ahead toward a cluster of suitcases rotating slowly under the glow of designer spotlights. High-end Italian luggage, polished wood-grain carry-ons, custom tags. But Koda wasn't scanning. He was locked in. A black leather suitcase emerged around the curve. Not just any bag, this one stood out, even among wealth. Handmade, sleek, the kind of item that whispered power rather than shouted it. Gold-trimmed corners, impeccably preserved. Its owner stood nearby, waiting without watching. A man in his 50s, salt and pepper beard, perfectly pressed charcoal suit. His posture was precise, his fingers lightly cradling a burgundy passport with a golden crest. Dr. Samir al-Rashid, according to the embossed luggage tag, diplomatic credentials noted. Amara's eyes narrowed. Koda's body stiffened, weight shifting onto his front paws, nose pointed like an arrow toward the suitcase. His breathing slowed, ears angled forward like twin radars. Amara's heart clicked into a different rhythm. It wasn't a full alert, not yet, but it was close. She stepped slowly forward, watching Koda, not the crowd. His tail remained still, but the muscles along his spine had begun to ripple with tension. She spoke just loud enough for him to hear. "What is it, partner?" He didn't react to her voice. That alone was a flag. Koda always acknowledged her until something deeper, more primal, overtook him. The black suitcase circled again. Al-Rashid shifted slightly, glancing toward it, then back at his phone. His expression unreadable, trained, too trained. Koda's head tilted. His eyes never left the case. A faint huff escaped his nose, half breath, half growl. Not aggressive, focused. The sound he made when he smelled something buried too deep to name. Amara took a single step forward and quietly touched her radio. "Control, this is Unit 7. Possible K9 interest at Carousel 3, Luxury Terminal. Diplomatic tagged luggage under observation. Requesting supervisor presence for verification." "Copy that, Unit 7. Supervisor en route. Proceed with passive observation." Al-Rashid turned now, not abruptly, more like someone reading the room. His gaze landed on Amara, then flicked briefly down to Koda. There was no fear, only the slight curve of lips forming a diplomatic smile. "Good morning, officer," he said smoothly. His accent was mild, educated. "Is there a problem?" Amara didn't answer right away. She watched Koda step closer to the carousel edge, nose lifting again as if measuring molecules. Just a routine sweep, sir. Thank you for your patience. Al-Rashid nodded politely, but she saw the glance, the twitch of his eye toward the exit, just for a fraction too long. It wasn't a nervous gesture. It was calculation, measured. Koda's breathing deepened. His body lowered slightly, just a few centimeters, but Amara felt it. He was entering that razor-thin space between observation and action. This wasn't play. This wasn't curiosity. It was instinct. And he wasn't wrong. Al-Rashid reached for his suitcase. His fingers paused on the handle, then gently recoiled when Koda gave the softest, growl-like breath. Just a vibration in the air, felt more than heard. The kind of sound that made your chest tighten without knowing why. "Is your dog always this intense?" Al-Rashid asked, still smiling. Amara's eyes stayed on Koda. "Only when he smells something that shouldn't be here." A pause, subtle, quiet. But in that space, everything changed. The air around the premium baggage carousel had thickened tension, wrapping itself around the polished floor and the quiet hum of the conveyor belt. Travelers still moved, still pulled their suitcases, still laughed into phone calls, unaware that the center of gravity in Terminal C had shifted. Koda stood stone still, eyes pinned to the black suitcase like a predator waiting for its moment. His body radiated a silent, alert, not full aggression, not panic, but a calibrated intensity that made Amara's fingers twitch near her radio again. Then came the voice, warm, practiced, dipped in the kind of authority that had spent years being obeyed. "Officer," said Dr. Samir al-Rashid, stepping forward with an elegant roll of his shoulders, "I believe there may be some misunderstanding." Amara turned to face him, her posture as calm as it was unyielding. Her hand, however, never left Koda's harness. "No misunderstanding, sir. We're conducting a routine canine sweep." Dr. al-Rashid offered a smooth, disarming smile. He extended a slim, dark red passport embossed with gold filigree, along with a neatly folded set of documents. His voice dropped just a half step. "I am a representative of the Al-Majid Cultural Affairs Office. Diplomatic clearance, level 3. That suitcase is designated diplomatic pouch. Per international law, it is not subject to search." Amara didn't reach for the documents immediately. She studied him. He looked the part. Tailored suit, pocket square folded with military precision, a watch that whispered quiet wealth. His grooming was impeccable, nails manicured, beard trimmed to regulation. But his eyes, they were too still, like glass over deep water. Finally, she took the passport and flipped it open. Her thumb brushed the edge of the diplomatic ID, then hovered over the signature. Her training told her what to look for: holographic security threads, barcode alignment, embossing inconsistencies. But there was nothing obvious, not yet. She handed it back slowly. "I respect your status, Dr. al-Rashid. However, our K9 has shown focused interest in your luggage. We'll need to perform a secondary screening." A slight beat. Al-Rashid blinked once. His lips remained in the shape of a smile, but something behind his eyes shifted, almost imperceptibly. "I'm afraid that won't be possible," he said. "As I've stated, this pouch is protected under the Vienna Convention. Interfering with it could be considered an act of diplomatic provocation. Surely you don't intend to risk that over a dog's instincts." Amara met his gaze head-on. Koda's instincts have uncovered weapons, narcotics, explosives, and more in the past year than most scanners detect in 5. When he alerts, we listen. The subtle pressure in the air became heavier. A few travelers had stopped nearby, sensing the charged undercurrent. One began filming with their phone. Another whispered something in Mandarin to her companion, pointing discreetly at the scene. Al-Rashid's smile finally faltered, not in the corners of his mouth, but in his posture. His shoulders tensed slightly. His thumb rubbed the seam of his jacket pocket. "I have a scheduled meeting with your Department of State in 2 hours," he said, quieter now, with that polite sharpness reserved for people used to commanding rooms. "If I'm delayed due to canine error, you'll find yourself in diplomatic waters far above your clearance, officer." Amara's jaw flexed. She wasn't new to power games. She had seen military colonels try to pull rank during battlefield evacuations, watched CEOs demand faster clearance in combat zones. But this was different, because Coda was still staring at the suitcase like it held something alive, something wrong. "I'm not detaining you," Amara said calmly. "I'm asking you to accompany me to the secondary screening area for standard verification." Dr. Al-Rashid exhaled slowly. The mask slipped back on. "And if I decline?" She didn't blink. "Then we contact Homeland Security and let them sort out jurisdiction. But let me be clear, if my partner escalates his alert, I will act, regardless of protocol." A voice cut through the rising tension. "Jensen?" It was Ridley, approaching fast. Coat half-buttoned, clipboard nowhere to be seen. His tone was clipped, his eyes sharp with warning. He stopped beside Amara, gave the situation a once-over, and nodded faintly to Al-Rashid. "Doctor, apologies for the confusion. Officer Jensen, a word." Amara followed him a step away, still keeping Coda between her and the suitcase. Her voice was low, firm. "He's holding. Something's in that case, and Coda's escalating." Ridley leaned in. "I know, and I don't like it either. But this is a flagged diplomatic pouch. You don't get to crack it open because the dog gave a growl." "With respect, sir," Amara said, her voice flat. "It wasn't a growl. It was a lock-on. He's tracking something real." Ridley exhaled, looked toward the crowd forming, and swore under his breath. "The press is going to eat us alive if we get this wrong. I'll try to buy you 5 minutes. That's all I can give." Amara nodded. Her mind was already racing. Behind them, Al-Rashid picked up his suitcase, but with noticeable hesitation now. Not fear, not guilt, just calculation, like a man measuring the timing of a move not yet made. And Coda's body tensed further, eyes narrowing. Something was about to break. Time has a strange way of slowing down when instincts collide with protocol. The carousel continued its slow, hypnotic rotation behind them, luxury luggage gliding by, like sharks circling beneath the surface. Dr. Samir Al-Rashid stood calm but tight, his manicured fingers gripping the handle of his black leather suitcase. The crowd had grown, as crowds always do, curious faces just beyond the perimeter, half concerned, half entertained. And behind it all, the low, ambient hum of the airport persisted like a heartbeat. Officer Amara Jensen's hand tightened on Coda's harness. She could feel the power coiled in him, the muscle just beneath her fingers trembling with held energy. His body language had shifted from interest to insistence. There was no more uncertainty, no more hesitation. He knew, and so did she. Still, the words of every supervisor, every protocol, every diplomatic training she'd ever had, thundered in her mind. He's a diplomat. That's a protected pouch. You touch it without clearance, you trigger an international incident. But her partner didn't care about protocol. He cared about what was inside that case. And as the last traveler cleared the area, Coda made his decision. With explosive force, he lunged. "No!" Al-Rashid shouted, recoiling as the Dutch shepherd's teeth sank into the side of the suitcase with a guttural snarl, yanking it clean from the man's grip. The leather bent and groaned under the pressure, metal corners clanking against the floor. Gasps erupted. The crowd scattered instinctively, some backing away, others pulling out phones. "Coda, release!" Amara shouted, but her voice cracked in the back of her throat, not from volume, but from a jarring realization. He wasn't attacking. He was extracting. The dog's jaws clamped tighter, dragging the suitcase back across the polished floor and placing his body between it and Dr. Al-Rashid. His hackles were raised, but he didn't advance. He didn't bite the man. He simply growled low, deep in his chest, a sound that vibrated through the floor tiles like a warning from something ancient and absolute. Security began converging. 2 officers flanked the scene, one with a hand drifting toward his sidearm. Amara raised a palm. "Stand down!" she barked, eyes not leaving the suitcase. "No weapons, no movement. Let me handle this." Al-Rashid had straightened. The mask was back on, but there was a crack forming at the edges. He brushed invisible dust off his sleeve with slow, deliberate care. When he spoke, his tone was icy. "Your animal just attacked a diplomatic courier under protection of international law. That is a violation." "He didn't attack you," Amara said, stepping forward slowly. "He went for the case, and he's not letting it go." Coda's teeth were still embedded in the leather, but Amara could see what he had revealed just beneath the bite marks. Threads of torn material had exposed something that didn't belong in luggage. Metal mesh, glinting faintly under the terminal lights, reinforced, military-grade, not luxury lining. She felt her throat tighten. "Sir," she said carefully, "I need to ask you to step back." "You're making a mistake," Al-Rashid replied, the edges of his voice starting to fray. "I have rights, and I will have your badge for this." The phones were still recording. Someone whispered the word terrorist. A toddler cried behind the barrier tape. But Amara's world had narrowed to one thing. The dog standing guard over the suitcase, his body low and braced like a soldier defending a wounded friend. There was no aggression, just resolve. And in his eyes, the same eyes she had first seen behind steel bars in a military kennel, was that unwavering question again. "Do you trust me?" She didn't move. She didn't blink. And she said quietly into her radio, "Unit 7 confirming K9 has made a decisive alert, requesting immediate bomb squad backup to secondary screening. I'm initiating override of protocol under threat criteria." There was silence on the other end, then static, then Ridley's voice. "Jensen, are you sure?" She looked at Coda. He growled again, lower this time, no longer warning but protecting. "I'm sure," she said. "Copy. Do not touch the suitcase further. I'm en route." Across from her, Al-Rashid's calm had begun to falter. His hand hovered near his pocket again, but not for his passport this time. His eyes had darted just once toward the nearest exit, calculating routes, odds, distance. Amara noticed. So did Coda. "Stay where you are, Doctor," she said firmly. He gave her a measured look. "You're very young to be making decisions this large." Amara stepped closer. Her voice dropped an octave, not loud, not confrontational, but certain. "And you're far too rehearsed to be innocent." The weight of the moment pressed on all sides. Cameras clicked, radios chirped. But for Amara, it came down to a single truth. Coda had never failed her. Not in training, not on patrol, not in the countless quiet moments when she'd felt herself slip into the gray haze of old battlefields and felt him nudge her back to now. He'd saved her more times than she could count. And now it was her turn to believe in him, loudly, openly, without hesitation. Time dragged like a blade. Inside the secondary inspection room, The air felt pressurized, too quiet for comfort, too formal to breathe. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like a swarm held barely at bay, and behind the one-way glass, airport security personnel were exchanging whispers like secrets not meant to survive daylight. Supervisor Ridley stood with both hands braced against the table, staring at a screen showing the paused footage from earlier. Coda frozen mid-lunge, Amara reaching, the suitcase buckling, a tableau that looked far more violent when framed from the wrong angle. "You have 10 minutes before the embassy calls again," said a voice from behind him. Agent Mallory from the Diplomatic Liaison Unit, face tight with tension. "And that's being generous. They're already drafting a formal complaint." Ridley ran a hand down his jaw, the gray at his temples more pronounced than usual. He hated mornings. Hated when a good officer did the right thing, and the system asked why she hadn't kept her head down instead. He turned. "And what do you want me to tell them? That our canine tore into a diplomat's luggage because the dog felt like it? That the officer responsible had a hunch?" "Tell them it's under review," Mallory said. "Tell them we're cooperating." Ridley looked back at the screen, then toggled to another window one that had just appeared. Interpol watch list. Alert flagged S. al-Rashid, alias confirmed usage in at least 2 other ports. Suspected false diplomatic status. Origin discrepancy pending. He blinked. "Wait, alias confirmed?" he muttered, and tapped to expand. The file was patchwork at best. The man had traveled under 3 different passports in the last 6 months, all with variations of the same name. Al-Rashid, Rashidi, Al-Rashid. The photos were similar, but just off enough that facial recognition hadn't caught it. Still, he had credentials, had the gait, the arrogance, the immaculate papers. And yet, Ridley walked out of the room. In the observation chamber, Dr. Samir al-Rashid sat alone, immaculate as ever. His gray suit unwrinkled, his gold pen perched precisely beside the leather wallet on the table. But something about him had shifted. He no longer looked irritated. He looked calculating. Amara could feel it. She stood behind the glass with Coda seated calmly at her side, though his ears were perked, eyes locked on the man like watching a fuse run short. Coda didn't twitch, didn't growl. He was waiting. A diplomat would be calling lawyers by now, blustering, demanding tea or translators. But this man, he just watched, still as stone. Only his fingers moved, tapping lightly on the table's edge like a metronome counting down to something no one else could hear. The door opened, and Ridley stepped in. Amara followed, her stance firm, hand resting lightly on Coda's harness. Both of them silent sentinels. "Dr. al-Rashid," Ridley began diplomatically. "I'm Supervisor Ridley. I understand you've expressed some concern about how the search was conducted." Al-Rashid didn't rise. His voice was smooth, each syllable laced with cultured authority. "Concern is not quite the word. I would call it a violation. I have already spoken with my embassy. They are preparing a statement. I am assured this will be handled swiftly." Ridley nodded. "Understandable. Though we're required to verify all credentials in cases of unusual alerts, we're cooperating fully with your mission office." Al-Rashid offered a small smile, more tooth than warmth. "Yet I remain detained, and your officer continues to stare at me as if I were some caged animal." Amara didn't blink. Ridley kept his tone level. "You are not detained. You are under a temporary delay for clarification of documents. and we are within our rights, as per airport policy and Interpol flag standards, to verify identities when there are inconsistencies." "Inconsistencies?" Al-Rashid said, raising an eyebrow. "What inconsistencies?" Ridley tapped his file. "For starters, your passport serial code does not match the issuing series from Doha. The formatting is from a batch reserved for economic delegates, not diplomatic corps." Al-Rashid blinked. Just once. Ridley went on gently. "Your diplomatic pouch also lacked the biometric tag now standard as of last year's treaty update." Amara could feel the tension shift, like a thread pulled taut. Still, Al-Rashid shrugged. "A clerical error. You know how these things are in our region. Paper trails are not your American specialty." Ridley offered a ghost of a smile. "And yet, it's exactly what we specialize in." A beat. Al-Rashid shifted in his seat, folding his hands over the table, his jaw flexed ever so slightly. "I would advise," he said softly, "that you think very carefully about how far you wish to escalate this. There are people watching." "We know," Amara said quietly. "They're filming everything outside, including how our dog reacted before we opened that case." There it was again, that twitch, the ever-so-small flicker of his right hand, like a chess player realizing too late he'd leaned into a trap. And behind her, Coda sat straighter. "Sir," Ridley added, voice clipped, "if you'd like to wait in one of our private lounges while your documents are verified, we can arrange that." Al-Rashid rose, slow and graceful, like smoke curling from a fire that hasn't yet been seen. "Yes, I think I would like that. But make no mistake, this delay will cost someone." His smile returned, colder than before. And as he left, flanked by 2 security guards, Amara stared after him, not with fear, but with the grim realization that they'd just pulled at the corner of something much, much bigger than anyone in that room understood. Coda let out a slow, low breath through his nose. Tick, tick, tick. The game had begun. The suitcase lay gutted on the stainless steel table like an open wound. What remained of the black leather casing sagged under the weight of its unraveling, clawed apart by Coda's precision teeth marks, clean but merciless. The zipper track peeled back like a crime scene reveal. The overhead light glared against the metallic fibers now visible beneath the lining, shimmering faintly, almost imperceptibly. Amara stood over it in silence, her gloved hand hovering just above the strange mesh embedded deep in the lining. It wasn't padding. It wasn't even standard protection. It was industrial. "Jesus," murmured one of the forensic techs, a young man named Lennox, barely out of academy training. He squinted at the panel. "That's not ballistic fabric. That's RF shielding mesh military grade or higher. Who the hell lines a civilian suitcase with this?" Amara didn't answer. Her eyes were already on the suitcase, tag burnished, still intact. Dr. Samir Al-Rashid, Doha, diplomatic transit. But everything about this bag screamed the opposite of transparency. Ridley entered, clipboard in hand, reading as he walked. "Talk to me." Lennox looked up. "It's not just the mesh, sir. We also found puncture marks inside the inner foam, triangular, uniform spacing, almost like they were holding something, maybe vials or needles. Or darts," Amara added. That made Ridley stop in his tracks. He walked to the table, leaned in, and examined the mesh closer. He didn't touch it. He didn't have to. The metallic crisscross, layered so thin it almost looked decorative, was unmistakable to someone who'd spent time in joint operations. "Faraday grade," Ridley muttered. designed to block scans, chemical, thermal, even biometric detection. Smuggling? Lennox offered. No, Amara said, voice low. Camouflage. Whatever was in this suitcase, someone didn't want it found by machine, animal, or man. A heavy silence fell. One of those silences that felt like a verdict. Ridley set his clipboard down with a little more force than necessary. All right. This goes beyond airport security. I'm escalating to the Department of Homeland Coordination, and I want a complete debrief transcript on my desk-full canine engagement report included. Already logged it, Amara replied, gesturing to the cam footage looping silently on the side monitor. Coda freezing near the carousel, posture tense, head tilted just so before the suitcase passed. Ridley watched it play again, then again. The dog's body language spoke louder than sirens. But just as Amara was about to speak, the conference room door opened. 2 men and a woman entered executive tier, airport leadership in tailored suits and corporate calm. Supervisor Ridley, said the lead, a man named Thatcher from Administration Oversight. We need a word. Ridley exchanged a glance with Amara, then nodded once. Lennox, stay with the evidence. Secure everything. No one touches that lining until Hazmat clears it. He followed them into the adjacent conference nook, Amara close behind, Coda at heel. Inside, the tone shifted quickly. Thatcher didn't waste time. We're getting calls from multiple levels, state, commerce, even an overseas consulate. Dr. Al-Rashid's embassy is demanding his immediate release and an official apology for the public humiliation your team caused. Ridley didn't blink. He's not under arrest. No, but his luggage was destroyed by a government animal in a public terminal. That complicates things. Amara stepped forward. Sir, with respect, the luggage was flagged by Coda based on scent and behavior. The damage was minimal until we discovered concealed Faraday shielding military-grade mesh inside what was supposed to be a diplomatic courier's bag. One of the execs, a woman in a gray pantsuit, raised a skeptical eyebrow. Do you have any proof that what was in the case posed a threat? No, Amara answered plainly, because whatever was inside is gone. Ridley crossed his arms. And what's left behind is even more suspicious. Shielding, needle points, sub-compartment tampering. This isn't clerical error, we're looking at deliberate evasion. Thatcher sighed, pressing his fingers to his temple. You're suggesting that an internationally protected individual was attempting to bypass federal scanning with a purpose-built case, without authorization? No, Ridley said, voice tight. I'm saying we've already let the wolf in, and now you're asking whether we should apologize to the teeth for scaring the sheep. A pause. Coda let out a low, barely audible exhale, his version of unease. Amara added more softly, He knew exactly what he was doing, sir. He looked at that suitcase like it wasn't a mistake. It was a message. Ridley's voice followed. And the more we hesitate, the colder that trail gets. For a moment, the suit said nothing. Finally, Thatcher leaned back in his chair. You'll get your full investigation. Quietly. Off-site. But we need deniability until then. Do what you have to, but keep it clean. No more dogs on luggage unless it pings every system we have. He stood, brushing imaginary lint from his sleeve. Let's not make a martyr out of a diplomat, even a fake one. They left without waiting for thanks. Amara stared after them, jaw clenched. Ridley's voice came low. Get Coda back in rotation. Quiet tale on Al-Rashid. I want to know where he eats, when he blinks, and who he calls. She nodded. Yes, sir. Coda tilted his head, gaze still on the torn suitcase in the next room, and in the silence, Amara could feel it, that eerie sense that they hadn't found the truth, only its footprint. Coda trotted beside Amara through the dimly lit access hallway that ran behind the customs corridor, his steps measured, ears alert but relaxed. The hum of distant escalators and occasional bursts of overhead announcements faded behind the soundproofing, leaving only the quiet rhythm of their footsteps and the occasional scuff of Amara's boots. She didn't speak, didn't need to, and neither did Coda. But as they neared the security checkpoint where Dr. Al-Rashid had last been seen, her hand brushed his flank, light as breath. It wasn't command, it was memory. The kennels at the tactical canine facility outside Quantico stank of bleach and anxiety. Metal bars rattled as young shepherds barked and snarled in a chorus of primal chaos, all of them lunging against cages like they could muscle their way into purpose. All of them, except one, kennel number 7. The young dog inside sat still, perfectly upright, tail tucked, but not curled in fear. His coat was darker than most, a deep sable-black sheen with rust-touched legs. His ears stood tall, but his eyes didn't look at the door like the others did. He looked through it. Amara stood with her hands in her jacket pockets, watching him through the mesh. One of the trainers, a gruff man named Dwyer, leaned in beside her. "That one? Not worth your time. Doesn't respond to commands, won't bite, won't bark, won't even play." He said it like a disappointment. "The others got drive. This one just dead eyes." But Amara didn't answer. She crouched slowly in front of the cage, letting the edges of her breath even out. The dog's gaze followed her, but he didn't move, not forward, not back, just stillness that watched. "What's his name?" she asked. "Protocol tag says R109. They were calling him Ghost. I call him Broken." Still crouched, Amara whispered more to herself than to Dwyer. "You're not broken," she murmured. "You just haven't been understood yet." And for the first time, the dog moved. Barely, but enough. One paw forward. A head tilt. Eyes softening, as if finally someone had spoken in a language he remembered from a dream. Amara reached a hand through the gate. He didn't flinch. "Coda," she whispered. The dog's ears flicked back in recognition of her tone, not a command, not an alert, something older, something rooted. They moved into position near gate D4, where CCTV last tracked Al-Rashid's silhouette merging into a crowd of early international boarders. Coda sat on haunches beside her, watching the world with that same quiet intensity from 3 years ago. Amara watched him watch. He was still that same silent sentinel from the kennel. But now he moved with her, not because he was trained to, but because they had built a vocabulary deeper than orders. There were no barked directives between them, no showmanship, just a shared field of awareness, a resonance. Her eyes wandered as her thoughts drifted back once more. A training field. Midnight. Rain slicked the grass with cold. Most canines failed in wet conditions, olfactory sensors dulled, distractions multiplied. But that night, Amara had brought Coda to the line, leash loose, command silent. She hadn't told him where to go. She didn't need to. He moved like a ghost through the dark, and found the buried decoy in 14 seconds. The evaluators clapped. Her instructor raised eyebrows. But what stayed with her wasn't the stopwatch. It was the look in Coda's eyes when he returned to her, soaked and panting, tail still and eyes searching, not for praise, but for her. Like, "Did I do what you felt?" Like, "Are we still in sync?" And the answer had always been yes. Present day. A crackle in her earpiece pulled Amara back. Update from Gate D4. Al-Rashid not in boarding queue. Possible decoy bag movement en route to storage. Be advised. She looked down. Coda was already standing. He hadn't heard the comms, but something in the air, something in the scentscape no human could decipher, had shifted. Amara rose. Coda glanced at her once. No bark, no whine, just a silent check-in. And again she whispered it, words that had come to mean something sacred. "You're not broken." Her fingers grazed his collar. "You're the reason I still believe in instinct." And Coda, tail flicking just once, turned with her as they headed down the corridor toward the belly of the airport, toward the luggage hold and whatever truth waited inside. The baggage screening room wasn't built for diplomacy. Fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead, casting a harsh white glow on rows of X-ray monitors and conveyor belts that hummed like tired sentinels. The space was utilitarian, clinical, made for clear answers, not questions swallowed by shadows. But that's exactly what the suitcase gave them. "All right," muttered Specialist Carmen Leong, adjusting her thick-framed glasses as she lowered the black leather case onto the conveyor with gloved hands. "Let's see what you're hiding." The suitcase, the same one Coda had torn into hours before, had been stitched hastily with evidence tape securing the ripped corner. It still smelled faintly of antiseptic and something less definable. Aged metal, ozone, maybe oil. Amara stood to the side, arms crossed tightly across her chest. Coda at heel, eyes trained on the motionless bag like it might leap up and run. Ridley loomed in the background, phone to ear, murmuring in tight phrases to someone higher up the chain, probably someone with a flag behind their desk and immunity clauses in their drawer. Carmen hit the button. The belt whirred. The suitcase slid smoothly into the X-ray chamber. Amara leaned toward the monitor. So did Carmen. And then both women frowned. Nothing. Not nothing as in nothing suspicious. Literally nothing. The outline of the suitcase appeared like a rectangular phantom there, and then not. Its shape melted into inky voids on the screen, as if light itself had been swallowed whole. "What the?" Carmen muttered, double-checking the alignment. She toggled contrast settings, flipped to thermal overlay. Still nothing. No zipper contours, no buckles. No layering of clothes or compartments, just black, like a blind spot etched onto the machine's vision. "It's like the suitcase is absorbing the scan," Carmen whispered, more to herself than anyone else. "This isn't a glitch. It's deliberate." Amara stepped closer, her voice low. "Are we talking signal scrambling?" "No," Carmen replied, her voice tight. "Scramblers distort the image. You'd see static, interference patterns, false artifacts. This is different. This is a full blackout. It's like it's made of anti-imaging material." Ridley finally hung up and crossed the room, jaw clenched. "Update me." Carmen didn't take her eyes off the screen. "We're blind, sir. I've never seen a suitcase register like this." "Run it again." Carmen hesitated. "Same angle?" "Try vertical," Amara offered. "Might pierce through any shielding overlap." Carmen nodded and turned back to the conveyor controls. The bag reversed with a dull mechanical sigh, rotated upright by motorized side flaps, and rolled back into the scanner. The machine hummed louder this time, almost indignant. A beat. 2. The image refreshed, and the monitor filled with the same yawning darkness. "Jesus," Ridley murmured. "Still nothing?" Carmen glanced at him. "Even the metal handle doesn't register anymore. It's not just lining, it's internal. Entire contents are invisible. Amara exhaled through her nose. That's not even advanced smuggling tech. That's military grade. She turned to Ridley. This isn't about trafficking anymore. This is something bigger. Ridley didn't answer. He was watching the screen, but his mind was elsewhere, on the phone call, the embassy, the veiled threats of diplomatic retaliation already slithering through the bureaucratic chain. As if on cue, the main door opened and Officer Malik stepped in, holding out a tablet. "Sir, another call. Embassy official. They want the bag released immediately. Say it's part of a sealed diplomatic consignment." Ridley stared at the bag, then at Amara. She didn't blink. "You know what this looks like, Ridley," she said. "No civilian, no diplomat. No one has any business moving stealth gear through an airport disguised as luggage." "And yet," Ridley muttered, pinching the bridge of his nose, "they've got diplomatic immunity and we have a shredded chain of custody, thanks to your dog." Coda gave a quiet grunt like he knew he was being talked about. His eyes never left the suitcase. Carmen ran one more diagnostic, her voice quiet. "There's a thermal layer beneath the lining. That's why we're seeing nothing. It's using adaptive cooling to mimic ambient temperature, like a Faraday cage and a cryo wrap had a baby." Amara's heart thudded once. Coda had reacted to that suitcase long before it was flagged by human tools, long before science gave it a name. Ridley rubbed his temples. "Do we have legal cause to hold it?" "No," Carmen answered. "But we have cause to question why a doctor would shield a suitcase from all known forms of surveillance in a public terminal. Or," Amara added, "why a supposedly legitimate diplomat had fake pages inserted into his credentials. You saw the glue residue. You saw the age mismatch." Silence followed. Then Ridley asked the question no one wanted to hear aloud. "Do we open it?" The room fell still. Carmen bit her lip. "Not without a court order. Not unless he waives immunity." "He won't," Malik added. "He's already preparing a written protest. Claims racial profiling. Threatening escalation." Amara looked to Coda. The dog's head had tilted slightly, nose twitching. Not alert, not yet. But something in his posture had changed again. Focused. Forward. There was no sound in the scanner room now except the distant clatter of baggage carts and the low whir of the idle conveyor. Amara spoke quietly. "Run it one more time." "Why?" Ridley asked. "Because instinct is the only tool we've got left. And Coda's never failed me." The silence in the secure briefing room wasn't comforting. It was surgical. The kind of stillness that dissected every breath, every eye flick, every second too long spent waiting for a truth that refused to come clean. Amara sat at the end of the table, flanked by Ridley on one side and Officer Mia Han on the other. Her fingers tapped a slow, steady rhythm against the case file labeled Dr. Samir al-Rashid, Diplomatic Inquiry. Across from them, the man himself reclined coolly, his suit impeccable, hands folded on the table, demeanor that of a seasoned traveler mildly inconvenienced. He offered no sweat, no fidget, no cracks in posture, only composure honed over years of navigating systems designed not to question too much. But composure couldn't hide what the servers finally unearthed. "Run it again," Ridley said, his voice low but sharp, as if repetition would force a different result. Amara nodded to Mia, who tapped at her tablet and mirrored the data to the wall screen. The embassy registry came up blank under his name. "No record of a scheduled diplomatic arrival under Dr. Samir al-Rashid," she said, scanning the entries. "Not on any active itinerary. Not on the ministry's passenger clearance list. There's a gap in entry logs, and the flight manifest doesn't match with any diplomatic priority pass from Doha or Istanbul. Someone slipped through a side door. Dr. Al-Rashid didn't even blink. There must be a clerical error, he offered. Smooth, polished. Our embassy staff in Washington can confirm my schedule. These things take time to register across systems. Amara leaned forward. We're not talking about a late check-in. We're talking about forged clearance stamps. Your credentials using a serial format that was retired 3 years ago, and an ID photo digitally aged to mask the fact that it was lifted from a public health symposium article in 2009. She slid a printed side-by-side comparison across the table. Dr. Al-Rashid glanced at it briefly, then looked back up, voice laced with mild offense. You're implying this is deliberate? Interpol doesn't imply, Mia cut in, cool and efficient. They just flagged your document style. 6 other cases in the past 18 months. Wildlife smuggling, endangered species, items shipped under diplomatic seals to bypass customs. Same ink signature, same watermark inconsistencies, same blacked-out baggage contents. Something flickered in the man's eyes then. Not panic, but recalibration. A thin adjustment of breath, the barest twitch of jaw muscle. For someone used to manipulating systems, the sudden pushback must have felt like a hallway narrowing behind him. Ridley shifted, clearly uncomfortable. Your embassy, if that's where you're really aligned, hasn't returned our verification call, he said. And unless you can produce matching authentication from your government, we have a problem. Dr. Al-Rashid exhaled, slow and even. You're turning an inspection into an inquisition. No, Amara said quietly. We're turning instinct into evidence. There's a difference. Coda, curled under the table at Amara's feet, lifted his head slightly. His ears perked. The dog didn't growl, didn't bark, but he was listening, watching. And so was Mia. She was about to speak when she paused, her attention narrowing on a detail others missed. Dr. Al-Rashid's right hand, casually resting beneath the table, thumb brushing the underside of his sleeve. But the motion was too consistent, too deliberate. Not the idleness of nerves, but of habit. She tilted her body slightly, just enough to change her angle. Her eyes dropped. That's when she saw it. A phone, tucked palm down in his lap. His left hand had shielded the screen from direct view, but his right thumb was moving. Tap, pause, swipe, tap. Mia's voice cut in sharp. Sir, please place your hands on the table. Dr. Al-Rashid's eyes flicked to her, still composed, still pretending. But the pause was half a beat too long. Amara stood slowly. Hands, now! He hesitated, then relented, lifting both hands and placing them deliberately on the table. But the phone remained on his lap. Coda, Amara said softly. The shepherd was up in an instant, his body low and quiet, moving around the table with surgical precision. In one smooth motion, he stopped at Al-Rashid's side and sat, alert, ears forward, gaze trained on the man's thigh. The tension in the room tightened like a noose. I suggest you stand, Amara said, and leave the device where it is. Dr. Al-Rashid met her gaze. A flicker of something darker surfaced now, not fear, not guilt, just calculation. He stood, and when he did, a black phone clattered from his lap onto the floor. The screen was still glowing text thread open. Arabic script scrolled by. Mia retrieved it carefully, handing it to Amara, who scanned the messages. Coordinates, times, a list of tagged biological samples, a set of airport exit instructions labeled diversion route. Her blood went cold. "Diplomatic courier, my ass," Mia muttered. Amara looked up at Ridley. "Tell me again we don't have probable cause." Ridley said nothing, and Dr. Samir al-Rashid, whose name wasn't real, who didn't blink when lies unraveled, simply sat back down, the veneer finally cracking. Coda's eyes never left him. The message glared from the intercepted phone like an open wound. "Extraction team in place. Confirm package integrity." 6 words. No names, no location tags. Just purpose cold, efficient, and urgent. Amara stared at the screen, her thumb trembling ever so slightly over the glass surface. The words hadn't come from a burner phone or random chatter. The number was geo-pinned just outside the terminal. A real signal. Someone was out there waiting, watching, poised to move. "Jesus," Ridley whispered, stepping back from the table as if distance could dilute the gravity. "That's not just code. That's operational language." "No kidding," Mia said, pulling up an encrypted database through her secure line. "And it doesn't match any U.S. agency phrase structure. These aren't ours." The room fell into a tense silence. Coda paced slowly at the perimeter, sniffing near the window. His ears flicked toward the distant sound of rotors and sirens' tones still muffled by 3 layers of security, but enough to stir his instincts. The shepherd wasn't just alert now. He was agitated. A knock at the door cut through the tension. Ridley opened it, and in stepped 2 agents from Homeland Security, their suits sharp, eyes sharper. Behind them, a military attaché from the embassy of Karanistan adjusted his tie with exaggerated control. "Ms. Navarro," the senior agent said, "we're taking over from here." Amara didn't move. "Based on what jurisdiction?" "Federal mandate. Diplomatic conflict protocols," he replied. "This man is being held in a manner that could provoke an international incident." Mia snorted under her breath. "He's a walking violation of the Vienna Convention himself." The embassy attaché offered a tight smile. "This facility is out of alignment with the chain of command. If you detain a registered diplomat without cause, we'll escalate this." "We do have cause," Amara said, lifting the phone. "Intercepted messages, forged documents, and possible biological contraband. That's enough to keep him under observation." The attaché's smile didn't waver, but his voice turned cold. "Yet the package you're referring to has not been opened. Not formally. The scan data? Circumstantial. And my government has lodged an official demand for his immediate release." Ridley shifted again, this time more uncomfortably. His phone buzzed. One glance and his face lost color. Amara noticed. "What?" He handed the screen over without a word. It was a top-line directive, Homeland Directive 367A, compliance with high-risk diplomatic status. The language was wrapped in cautious legalese, but the meaning was unmistakable. De-escalate, return custody to diplomatic authority, minimize risk of incident, let him go. Amara's heart pounded once in her chest, like a warning drum. She looked at Ridley. "You're not serious." His jaw worked silently for a moment, as if trying to find the courage to explain something unjust with bureaucratic grace. "It came from above. We're being overruled." "By who?" "Does it matter?" the Homeland agent interjected. "You've done your part, logged the inconsistencies, flagged the anomaly, but this isn't your call anymore." Something inside her cracked, but it wasn't panic. It was deeper, that familiar fracture of ethics grinding against protocol. She'd seen it in war zones, in boardrooms, in debriefings where the truth got smothered in layers of acceptable lies. This was no different. I'm not just going to hand over a man who lied his way into the country with a suitcase that resists X-ray scans and a message confirming an extraction, Amara said, her voice calm but firm. The attaché stepped forward. Then we will file a formal complaint, and you will be suspended for obstruction. Across the room, Coda let out a soft growl. A low, rumbling vibration that echoed everything Amara couldn't yet say. She turned to Mia. Do we have any visual on this team? Mia tapped a feed from the terminal's outer perimeter. There. She zoomed in. 3 men in gray windbreakers standing just beyond the taxi lanes. Not talking, not pacing, just standing strategically placed to cover the exits. They haven't moved since the message was sent, Mia muttered. They're not here for support. They're here to extract. And we're supposed to just release him? Amara whispered. Ridley stepped beside her, eyes haunted. I've seen what happens when we push too far. There are calls we're not allowed to make, even when we know they're right. So what's left, Ridley? She asked. Obedience for comfort, or risk for truth? The room held its breath. Then Coda barked once sharp and sudden. All eyes turned. Amara exhaled slowly, then faced the attaché. You can take him, she said. The attaché's eyebrows lifted slightly. But let me be clear, she continued, voice sharpening like broken glass under velvet. If that man steps out of this terminal and something goes wrong, if any trace of illegal cargo leaves this airport, you will not be dealing with a customs agent. You'll be dealing with a federal investigation. You've made yourself clear, the attaché said coolly. And I will write every detail down, Amara added, every inconsistency, every decision, every pressure point. We may lose today, but I don't think the truth stops at borders. She leaned in. And neither does Coda's nose. Coda stood beside her now, tail low, eyes locked on the man across the room. No growl, no sound. Just the eternal stillness of instinct restrained until it no longer had to be. As they escorted Dr. Al-Rashid from the room, Amara watched the door close behind them. The silence afterward felt heavier than before. Mia touched her shoulder gently. We'll find a way. The scan anomaly. The intercepted message. They left fingerprints. Amara nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. Then we follow the fingerprints and pray they don't become tombstones. The corridor hummed with fluorescent sterility, but every instinct in Amara screamed that something was off. She walked beside Dr. Al-Rashid, her hand lightly grazing the leather strap of Coda's harness. The shepherd moved silently at her side, muscles taut, head low. His eyes never left the man. Too calm, too quiet. And then it happened. Not a scream, not a scuffle, just a flick of movement, the kind only trained eyes would notice. Al-Rashid's left hand dipped into his coat just as they passed the janitorial supply closet. Amara's heart skipped. Her fingers twitched toward her sidearm, but it was already too late. A sharp click, and the fire door beside them burst open, triggered by a magnetic override. Al-Rashid surged sideways with surprising speed, ducking through the emergency exit and vanishing down the dim corridor beyond. A hard shove knocked a baggage cart into Amara's path. Coda barked once sharp, alert. Go! She yelled, vaulting over the cart. The hallway behind the fire door was tight and dimly lit. Service tunnels for luggage crews and maintenance rarely patrolled, a perfect rabbit hole. Coda darted ahead, claws scraping on the industrial concrete. His silhouette flickered like a shadow just ahead of the bouncing light panels. Amara followed, breathing hard, pulse hammering against her ears. Terminal 4 exit breach, level B, she shouted into her comm. "Subject fleeing into service tunnels! Engaging pursuit!" Static answered, then silence. No signal down here. Just the sound of her boots and Coda's paws pounding in rhythm, chasing a man who knew exactly how to disappear when no one was watching. She hit the first turn. The stale air smelled like rust, wet concrete, and something sharp. Synthetic. Her stomach tightened. Ahead, Coda stopped ears forward, nose to the ground, tail locked. He looked back once. No bark, no whimper, just the question in his eyes. "Do we go deeper?" Amara nodded, voice low. "Find him." Coda turned without hesitation, sprinting toward the darkness, and Amara ran after him, not knowing what waited ahead, only knowing one thing for sure. Whatever was in that suitcase, it was never meant to fly. The air thickened as Amara pressed deeper into the underbelly of the terminal, the hum of humanity above giving way to the breathing silence of utility corridors and echoing pipes. Each footfall sounded louder here. Every breath a sharp inhale of disinfectant, old oil, and something else, metallic, clinical, wrong. Coda slowed near a junction, his nose twitching rapidly as he traced the air like a living sonar dish. His tail swished once. Then he turned right. Amara followed, heart hammering, adrenaline steadying her legs. Her comm crackled back to life with a hiss. "Base, this is Officer Patel. Suspect is fleeing via Service Corridor Delta. Repeat, Service Corridor D, Sublevel 2. A beat of silence. Then Supervisor Ridley's voice, tight with tension. "Copy that. Reinforcements rerouted. Maintain visual if possible. Do not engage alone." Amara didn't respond. She couldn't. Coda was already moving again, ears perked, steps silent. Down here, the walls themselves seemed to shift. Doorways to access tunnels blending into utility hatches, pipes curving like the veins of a giant sleeping under concrete skin. The airport had bones, and she was walking through them. Then came the voice, not hers, not Ridley's, but through the shared channel clear, deliberate low. "This is Curator. Contingency activated." Amara froze mid-step. The voice had weight-old silk over iron, the kind you don't forget once it touches your spine. Coda growled, low, uneasy. She knew then. The man they were chasing wasn't just a smuggler. He was a designer, a curator of dark paths and deeper trades, and he knew this place like he had built it himself. "Farouk Manel," she whispered under her breath, mind racing. Not Dr. Samir al-Rashid, not a diplomat, a ghost with clearance codes and a history written in ash and ivory. Somewhere ahead, metal echoed against concrete. Not footsteps, more calculated, controlled. Coda tensed, ears pinned forward, one paw raised mid-step like a statue frozen in breath. Then it happened, a flicker of movement behind the corner piping, and a flash. Pop. Not thunder, not a bang, but whispers with teeth, the distinct sound of a suppressed shot. The tile by Amara's head exploded into dust. Her instincts kicked in. She threw herself against the nearest alcove, back scraping hard concrete, shoulder stinging. Coda barked a deep, sharp alert and pressed low against her side, waiting for the next cue. "Shots fired!" Amara's voice tore into the radio. "Officer down-armed, suspect service corridor B. Repeat, area B. Gunfire confirmed." Another round kissed the corner, closer this time. Clean, precise, not panic fire, he was hunting her. Composite weapon. Unregistered. No muzzle flash. The kind used in silenced takedowns, not chaotic ambushes. That was who Farouk Manel was. a man who didn't speak unless it was the last thing you'd hear. From the far end, a shadow shifted, not fleeing now, but waiting, watching. Amara could feel his calm. "You never should have followed," he called down the corridor, his voice like sand through silk. Another shot, this time lower, ricocheting off a pipe beside Coda. The German shepherd flinched, but held his ground. "Control. I need backup now," Amara hissed into her shoulder mic. "We are pinned. No escape. Suspect has active weapon." But the reply came cold. "Negative. Lockdown protocols in effect. Closest team ETA. 7 minutes." 7 minutes. An eternity in a tunnel designed to swallow sound and hope. Coda growled low, his body like a taut wire, eyes locked into the dark ahead. Amara's hand trembled, not from fear, but from restraint. She could feel Coda's breath sinking with hers. They would not run, not from a ghost in a tailored suit with a gun tucked into lies, not while that suitcase still pulsed with secrets that had crossed oceans, and not while the only living soul standing between truth and vanishing was a woman and her dog. The runway access gate groaned open too slowly for coincidence. Farouk Manel, now cloaked in a blood-spattered blazer and stripped of any civility, shoved past an unsuspecting catering driver. The van idled beside the tarmac like a waiting accomplice. His movements were clinical years of extraction drills stitched into every pivot and glance. A second more and he would be gone. Then, Coda. Out of the fog and hydraulic hiss, the German shepherd burst forward like a silent missile with eyes on fire. Farouk's head whipped around just in time to see 88 pounds of trained instinct lunging straight at him. "No!" But it was too late. Coda collided with him mid-stride, jaws clamping down on the arm reaching for the van handle. The crack of cartilage snapped through the air like judgment. Farouk screamed a short, guttural sound, more rage than pain. They crashed to the ground. Metal trays from the catering cart clattered like broken lies. Coda didn't relent. He held position, growling deep in his throat, eyes fixed, body hovering just above Manel's ribcage. Dominant. Unyielding. "Coda, heel!" Amara's voice cut through the chaos, boots pounding the concrete. The shepherd released, retreating just enough to allow Amara clearance. She didn't hesitate. One knee on Farouk's back, she yanked both arms behind him with a speed born of necessity. Clink, click. Cuffs snapped shut like truth, finally locking in. "You have no idea," Farouk spat through gritted teeth. "Who protects me?" Amara leaned in close, her voice steady as steel. "And you have no idea who trained him." For a breathless beat, all went still. The van idled behind them. Sirens began to rise in the distance. But in that moment, under a floodlight that painted the scene in sterile white coda, stood tall beside Amara. His chest heaved, flecks of blood on his muzzle, but his eyes, they glowed with something deeper than instinct, purpose. And justice, tonight, had fangs. The room was sterile by design, by necessity. Concrete walls absorbed every footfall, every breath. The harsh fluorescents didn't flicker, but their cold light made the space feel more like a morgue than a debriefing bay. The bomb squad moved with surgical precision. Hazmat suits rustled as they circled the torn black suitcase, now sealed inside a transparent containment shell. Behind reinforced glass, Amara watched, arms crossed tight against her chest. Beside her, Coda sat silent, head tilted, as if sensing what no human yet dared say aloud. It wasn't a bomb. It was worse. With a hiss of pressure, the outer case was unsealed. The suitcase's inner lining, once thought to be metal mesh for shielding electronics, peeled away to reveal a hidden secondary compartment. The bomb tech paused. "What the hell is that?" A second technician leaned in, voice low with awe and something colder. Fear. "Looks like a containment pod, multiple temperature zones, micropumps, IV lines." The lid came off with a mechanical click, and the horror unfurled. Miniature life support systems, 8 in total, rested within. Clear, fluid-filled pods shimmered faintly under the lights. Tiny hearts beat inside them. Not machines, creatures. Sedated, gasping, alive. A rare poison dart frog no larger than a fingernail. A snow-white gecko with opalescent skin that pulsed like silk under moonlight. An iridescent parrot hatchling, motionless but breathing, its wing pinned gently beneath a padded brace. One by one, the technicians removed each living being with the care usually reserved for transplant organs. "Each pod has temperature calibration," the lead hazmat analyst whispered. "Humidity control, even metabolic regulators. They weren't just transporting these, they were preserving them for sale." Amara's throat tightened. "These weren't pets." The analyst nodded grimly. "No, they were inventory." Coda let out a quiet whine, ears low. Even he seemed disturbed, not by noise or threat, but by some unspoken grief hanging thick in the air. The deeper they dug into the suitcase, the more sinister it became. Hand-labeled notes in Arabic and French, dosage charts, a pricing sheet coded with Latin genus names. One creature had died en route, its eyes frozen open in a pod that had failed to regulate temperature. The room seemed to lose oxygen. "This isn't trafficking," Amara said quietly. "It's harvesting." A long silence followed. The youngest technician backed away from the table, ripping off his hazmat hood as if the plastic itself now carried contamination. He bent over, dry heaving into a disposal bin. Nobody spoke. No one had to. Because beneath the metal, under the science, inside the glass-lined horror of that suitcase, was the proof. Proof that someone, somewhere, had catalogued life like contraband. That behind the name Dr. Al-Rashid was not just a man with fake credentials, but a mechanism, a collector, a curator of extinction. And they had almost let him walk. The silence in the containment bay had grown cavernous. Outside the decontamination corridor, Amara stood behind a lead-glass barrier, arms tensed at her sides. Her gaze was fixed not on the rescued animals, but on the empty base of the suitcase, where the lining curled back like old skin. "There's a false bottom," one technician murmured. No one replied. Tools moved in. A gloved hand worked under the bent seam metal clicked against metal, and with a muted snap, a second compartment revealed itself, not padded, not cushioned. This one was lined in lead. "Oh no," whispered hazmat-led Voss. He gestured quickly, voice suddenly formal. "Full chemical protocol. Now." Within the compartment were no animals. Instead, 5 steel canisters no longer than a syringe, each sealed, marked with colorless biohazard tags in Arabic and Russian. A quiet alarm pulsed red on the exterior reader. Voss's voice cut through the comms. "We've got biologicals. Repeat biological agents. Secure transport. Initiate level 4 seal." The air shifted, heavier now, each breath a little more deliberate. Coda tensed beside Amara, rising without a command. His ears shot forward, tail stiff, not aggression, but something closer to recognition. Voss reached for a scanner. "Radiation's normal, but these—" He stepped back. "This one's marked Philobates terribilis. That's the golden poison frog." Another hazmat tech read from a printout found wedged beside the vials. "Purified alkaloid extracts. Refined, weaponized, lethal in micrograms." Amara's voice was hoarse. "How lethal?" The answer came low and immediate. One vial could drop a city block, absorbed through skin, no scent, no taste. One of the canisters trembled ever so slightly under the steady hum of the refrigeration system. Condensation beaded along the chamber's interior wall like sweat from something alive. Behind them, Ridley arrived. He stared at the vials and didn't speak for a full 6 seconds. "They were never smuggling animals," he said finally. "They were smuggling death, hidden in life." A beat passed, then 2. The pieces began to click together. The forged customs slips, the missing verification, the diplomatic shielding, the life support pods to justify the suitcase's climate control, the decoy animals innocent enough to elicit compassion, elaborate enough to earn clearance. The real payload had been beneath them all along. Voss sealed the case again with magnetic locks, then met Amara's eyes through the glass. "We almost missed it," he said quietly. "Almost let it through." Amara didn't respond. She was already staring at the wall-mounted map of outbound flights. Her fingers moved to her radio. "Control," she said. "I need passenger manifest cross-referenced now, anyone with secondary baggage unaccounted for. If there's one payload, there could be more." Her voice dropped. "We're not done. And neither was the man who called himself Dr. Al-Rashid. They kept him in holding bay, 3 an unmarked room built for silence. No clock, no window, just a table bolted to the floor and 2 chairs that had seen decades of secrets. Farouk Manel sat with his hands cuffed in front of him, wrists bearing the faint red grooves of resistance long since surrendered. His face, once composed under layers of false academia, now showed sweat across the brow and something colder in the eyes. Calculation, not fear. Across from him, Amara leaned forward, elbows on the steel. No good cop, no bad cop, just truth and whatever was left to extract from its edges. "We know about the frogs," she said softly. "We know about the vials." No reaction. "What we don't know," she continued, voice tightening, "is where the 6th canister went." Still nothing. "Start talking, or I swear Interpol won't be your biggest problem." That got him. A dry smile crept to the corner of Manel's mouth, slow and bitter. He looked up, not at her, but at the camera in the corner of the room. "You won't find it," he said, "because it's already where it was meant to go." Amara didn't blink. "You used the animals as a cover." A nod, slight, almost bored. "They fetch good money, rare ones. Easier to move than diamonds, easier to bury." She slid a photo across the table, one of the sedated reptiles curled in plastic casings, eyes clouded under tranquilizer. "You treated them like product." He met her gaze now. Something darker passed between them. "Because that's all they are to the people who pay me." Amara's fingers curled into fists. "And the biotoxins?" This time he laughed. Once, low. "You think that's about money?" He leaned in, cuffs scraping metal. "The toxins are for buyers you can't even imagine. People who don't need weapons. They need leverage." "Name them," Amara snapped. But Manel only exhaled, a hiss of smoke without a flame. "You think Interpol wants me in custody because of frogs?" He tilted his head. "Ask them what they did in Ankara or Bogota or the river in Luzon." He sat back, chains clinking. "You arrest me now, but I am not the only one. I'm just the one you caught." Amara paused, then held up a folder with a blue seal. "We confirmed your prints. Farouk Manel, multiple aliases, 6 outstanding warrants, 17 dead by confirmed consequence of smuggling. And now a bioterror charge." She opened it slowly. "You're not walking out of here." For the first time, something flickered behind his eyes. Not regret, recognition. Coda barked once, sharply from the hall, as if sensing the tremor beneath the surface. Manel's voice dipped. "You think this ends with me. But I was just a courier. Just the curator, like I said." He leaned closer, one final whisper. "You've only opened the first box." Amara stood, face stone set. "Then we'll open them all." And as the door clicked open, an agent stepped in, Farouk Manel. The man who'd once been Dr. Samir al-Rashid smiled not like a man defeated, but like someone who'd just played the first move in a much larger game. The servers hummed like a low drone of warning. Inside the Joint Task Operations Center, screens flickered with maps, data packets, and decrypted messages spilling across continents like arteries of infection. Amara stood to the side of the main table, arms crossed, eyes heavy not from fatigue but from how much was still buried. Specialist Moreno tapped a key. "Here." Secondary cloud cache hidden in a ghost drive. Encrypted, but Coda's tracker inadvertently picked up GPS bleed while in pursuit. A 3D globe rendered on the center display. Red dots began to bloom. Not one country. Not 2. 3 continents. "The suspect wasn't lying," said Agent Redley. "He's not the top. He's a handler." Amara nodded slowly. "A curator. Managing acquisitions for others." Moreno pulled up a folder labeled RBC, a code name that showed up in several transactions. Files loaded with shipment manifests, lab requests, and obscured invoices labeled organic payloads. "We traced 10 of these purchases to a shell company in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Another 12 to an unlisted depot outside Yogyakarta. But look at this." She enlarged an internal memo translated automatically. "Specimens viable. Transport under curator's clearance. Biomod testing confirmed. Next phase, hybridization viability." The silence in the room thickened like frost. "This wasn't just animal trafficking," Amara said. "They were pushing into biotech." "Or weaponizing biology," Redley added grimly. A second feed burst onto the side screen. Footage from a raid in Marseille, black uniformed agents kicking down a warehouse door. Crates inside were lined with nitrogen seals. No animals this time, just glass vials, some broken. "This was supposed to be his next drop," Moreno whispered. Another screen blinked to life. An intercepted Zoom call scrubbed from a now-defunct dark web platform. The voice on the audio wasn't Farouk Manel's. It was female, precise, accented. "The doctor delivers. If he fails, we pivot. There are always other curators. The market remains." Amara's spine stiffened. "They're still operational." "More than that," Redley said, turning toward her. "They're evolving." Amara turned to Coda, sitting alert at the back of the room, calm but focused. Eyes locked on the screen as if he, too, could sense that what they'd uncovered wasn't the end. It was the surface. "Get Interpol. Who? The UN if you have to," she ordered. We're not chasing one trafficker anymore. We're chasing a network. And as the lights of the digital web pulsed across oceans, the gravity of it settled in. This wasn't just about saving animals anymore. It was about saving people before they became the next test subject. The walls of the conference suite were soundproofed on paper, but the tension inside bled through concrete. Amara stood in the far corner, watching two men sit across from each other at the polished mahogany table. The embassy seal behind them gave the illusion of order. But illusions were Manel's specialty. "Let me be clear," said Deputy Consul Renan Alvi, voice sharp, tremoring with the strain of betrayal. "I signed off on a diplomatic pass for Dr. Samir al-Rashid. I had no idea he was a proxy." His fingers were trembling. Amara noticed it as he held up the clearance file. Stamped, verified, routed through internal channels, all legitimate, except it had been weaponized. "You weren't the target," said Director Sandler from Homeland Security, leaning forward. "You were the instrument." At the other end of the room, the second representative, a man who had introduced himself as Malik Youssef, sat stone-faced, eyes darting not with fear but calculation. He hadn't spoken since his arrest 3 hours prior, when inconsistencies in his diplomatic registry triggered a red flag in the Interpol interface. His name? Not in any embassy records. But his face Interpol had it. Just not under Malik Youssef. "Abed Halim," Sandler said aloud, sliding a still image across the table. "Captured in 2018, Lagos. The same man photographed handling crates with biohazard markings flanked by guards. Code name in the database, Courier Blackjack. A mover, trusted by Manel for the high-value transfers things too fragile or too volatile for normal smuggling channels." "How long was he embedded in the consulate?" Amara asked. 4 years, Alvi answered hollowly. "Security background cleared by our own ministry." "Do you understand what this means? If they've cracked our vetting, this could go beyond—" He didn't finish, because they all knew where it led. Every embassy, every diplomatic pouch, every immunity loophole exploited like arteries through the system. "They weren't just smuggling creatures," Amara murmured. "They were smuggling systems." One of the intelligence analysts stepped in, whispering to Sandler fresh updates from the forensics team. Encrypted thumb drives found in the lining of diplomatic cargo, not hidden from the embassy, hidden within it. Information tunnels riding under the radar of even the tightest surveillance. A system built on legitimacy turned sideways. Renan Alvi leaned back in his chair, eyes distant. "He shared coffee with my staff, celebrated national days with us. I trusted him with cultural programs. And all the while—" Amara softened just slightly. "He didn't fool you because you were careless. He fooled you because he was trained to." Sandler cut in with finality. "From this moment forward, no diplomatic seal gets a pass. I don't care who threatens what. We sweep everything." And across the glass panel behind them, a new case file loaded. "Emerald Courier, confirmed nodes, Jakarta, Nairobi, Bogota." Amara looked down at Coda, lying at her feet, ever still but alert eyes tracking every word, every pause. Her hand dropped instinctively to his back. They were unraveling a web that didn't fear borders, because it used them. The name came through at 2:16 a.m., a code name pulled from a declassified Interpol archive, Operation Snowveal. Not because of snow, because of what lies beneath the white. Inside Homeland Security's Joint Operations Room, a half-dozen monitors lit up with synchronized feeds from 7 time zones, customs posts, airport terminals, and field command centers spanning Geneva, Mombasa, Porto Alegre, and Bangkok. A digital web of justice being tightened in real time. "All units confirm, Phase 1 is green," came the lead agent's voice over satellite link. Years of redacted intel, dozens of diplomatic dead ends, and now the unraveling of Farouk Manel's trafficking empire had finally hit critical mass. In the briefing hall below, Amara stood at the rear, watching the screens without speaking. She didn't need to. Her work had already spoken louder than she ever could. Coda sat beside her, the white police K9 lettering on his vest smudged with grime and smoke from the chase in Service Tunnel B. But his posture never faltered, still, sharp, waiting for her next move. The room buzzed with purpose. What began as a customs anomaly had exploded into the largest eco-trafficking takedown in a decade. "Based on Manel's decrypted files," said cyber ops analyst Rajiv Patel, "we've got routed shipments that include endangered snow leopards, engineered toxins, and get this bioacoustic mapping files tied to extinct species vocal ranges." Amara blinked. They were planning to clone sound or weaponize it. Silence pressed against the walls. Across the monitors, simultaneous raids unfolded. In Nairobi, a high-rise lab was stormed refrigerated units filled with rare amphibians, their hearts slowed to near death for transport. In Prague, a shipping container disguised as diplomatic wine storage was found, packed with stasis chambers. In Montreal, they found a black market auction in Progress High Rollers, bidding on endangered species as if they were collectible antiques. And at the center of it all, Manel's signature and embossed watermark only visible under UV. It was on everything. Back in Washington, a different kind of reckoning unfolded. Amara stood before the brass. Director Sandler didn't wait for ceremony. "You were told to stand down," he said, tone unreadable. "You didn't." "Because I knew the file was dirty," she answered, hand steady. "Every instinct screamed it. And I trusted the dog at my side more than the voices telling me to back off." She didn't add that she'd nearly lost Coda in the tunnels, or that every decision since had ridden the razor's edge between protocol and truth. Sandler nodded. "Which is why we're naming you lead liaison for the Interagency Wildlife Enforcement Task Force." The words didn't hit all at once. "Wait, what?" She blinked. "You've earned it," he cut in. "You cracked a network that's run dark for 12 years. And you didn't do it for medals or politics. You did it for the animals in the crate. For the truth." A beat passed. "And for the people they would have hurt next," Amara said softly. Coda shifted beside her as if understanding. Later that night, Amara found herself in the evidence vault, staring at one of the recovered crates. Inside, a sedated ocelot cub breathed slowly, hooked to a microventilator that still smelled faintly of ammonia and rust. She reached in with a gloved hand, touched the creature's fur gently. "You shouldn't have survived this," she whispered. But survival, she realized, was no longer the finish line. Justice was. She glanced down at Coda. He met her eyes. They weren't done yet. It started with a pulse in her shoulder. Not pain. Pressure. Like something waiting to break. Amara sat beneath DHS fluorescence, cradling her arm as the nurse adjusted her sling. Each tug scraped her nerves raw. "You're walking proof adrenaline is a hell of a drug," the nurse murmured. Amara said nothing. She stared at the blood pulsing in her knuckles, unsteady, uneven. Coda lay just outside the exam room, eyes locked on her. He hadn't left her side since the service tunnel, Not during the arrest. Not during the debrief. Not even when paramedics tried to sedate her. Earlier she'd testified in front of DHS Oversight and Interpol. Her words were clean, professional, but behind her voice the tunnel still played. The bullet, the shot, and Manel's last words, "You have no idea who protects me." Back in the exam room, the silence pressed in. "You're not sleeping," the doctor said. "It's in your eyes," Amara replied flatly. "It's not always flashbacks. Sometimes it's just noise. Boots on gravel, diesel, a call sign that cuts out mid-transmission." She exhaled. "I rebuilt everything. Thought I could be useful again. But this week, it all came back. The masks, the system, people used like product. Was it worth it?" she asked. The doctor paused. "It's worth it because you still feel it. The ones who scare me are the ones who stop." Outside the glass, Coda lifted his head as if he'd known. Back at her apartment, Amara sat on the floor, ice pack in her lap. Coda lay beside her, breathing slow and steady. Her phone buzzed. A message from Interpol. Snowville. Phase 2. One figure unaccounted for. Partial image enclosed. No alias. No trail. Justice wasn't done. The game wasn't over. And someone still played by rules not written yet. The airport triage center resembled a war zone. Floodlights replaced fluorescence. Flight boards now bore taped lists, vitals, hydration, species. 27 animals, some rescued, some barely alive. Amara moved among crates, numb. A young vet, Mika, whispered, "We've lost 3. "They do catch this kind of thing," Amara muttered. "Not when it's buried under forged diplomatic cargo and environmental mimicry tech." Across the room, Coda padded silently past the crates. Then he stopped. A tiger cub, no bigger than a duffel bag. IV in its paw, breathing slow. Coda lay beside it. Not to guard, not to track, to stay. "He hasn't moved in 30 minutes, Mika observed. "He knows," Amara said, "what's fragile, what matters." Monitors beeped. A chameleon coded. Staff rushed over. Coda didn't flinch. The tiger cub twitched. Coda exhaled, slow and soft. "You're a witness," Amara whispered, crouching beside him. Mika added, "If we stabilize the frogs, we can help the CDC map toxin strains." "What about the others?" "Sanctuaries if funded, labs if not. Some are too damaged." One crate in the back remained sealed, lead-lined, radiation symbols, biometric lock. "What's in that?" "No one knows. It wasn't alive." A vet walked past. "A bird had a tracker in its beak, linked to Latvia. This wasn't just trafficking, was it?" "No," Amara said. "The animals were carriers. Collateral. A DHS officer arrived. Top clearance, Operation Snowville, Round 2. The financier behind Manel had diplomatic access to 6 countries, and one manifest had your name." Amara didn't respond. She didn't need to. Some truths lived in silence, too sacred for words, too raw for explanation. This wasn't the end. Not even close. It wasn't closure, or justice, or even peace. It was something deeper, a shift. The moment when everything that had been fractured stopped falling apart and began, quietly, to take shape again. This wasn't the end. It was the center, the center of something new. A low sound broke the stillness, a breath, a flutter. The tiger cub stirred beneath its warming blanket, legs twitching softly in sleep. Its chest rose in shallow, rhythmic motion. Still alive. Still fighting. Coda noticed first. He didn't bark, didn't move abruptly. Instead, he inched closer, step by step, until he was beside the tiny creature. Then, deliberately, gently, he placed one large paw beside the cub's fragile one. His head tilted slightly. His ears perked, not in alert, but in recognition. A vow, not in language, not in logic, but in the way animals knew things long before humans ever could. A vow to protect, to bear witness, to remind everyone watching that life didn't just survive, it endured. Amara watched them in silence. The soldier beside the wounded, the protector beside the innocent. And for the first time in days, her throat tightened not from fear or fury, but from something far more dangerous. Hope. The headlines broke before the sun did. Airport K9 foils wildlife trafficking ring. Hero dog Coda stops global smuggling operation. The bite of justice. That image of Coda mid-air, intercepting the suspect, became a viral sensation. But Amara Reyes watched it only once. In a sterile briefing room, she turned off the phone quietly. No smile, no tears, just silence, like closing a book too heavy to reread. The media storm hit hard. CNN podcasts, documentaries all begged for comment. She declined every request, because it wasn't about fame, it was about what almost happened, and what still might. Mika entered with coffee and a file. "Congrats, you're now the face of DHS K9. Amara muttered, "Don't joke." "I'm not. The commissioner called you a national asset. Tell him I prefer liability with trauma." Outside, Coda stayed calm in the face of cameras. He never sought attention, just stayed aware. They moved him to a quieter wing. Amara followed. He lay by the window, beside a child's crayon drawing. "Coda, you are my hero." Amara sat beside him, silent. The media roared louder, but none of them saw the crate where a child had been curled among feathers. None held the sedated tiger cub or felt the cold weight of a loaded syringe. Later, Mika found them. "They want a statement," Amara whispered. "Tell them the real hero doesn't do interviews." That night, Amara stepped outside for the first time that day. She didn't check messages, didn't read articles. She tilted her face into the wind and breathed. Because headlines fade, but what they saved, that would stay. Change didn't roar, it crept. In quiet meetings, policy memos. The port authority's glass towers now housed internal reviews. Systemic vulnerabilities, Phase 1. Amara sat in the back. No uniform, no badge, just healing ribs and heavy memories. The new draft? Not perfect. But for the first time, diplomatic loopholes used to traffic animals and toxins were being flagged and closed. Embassy shipments now subject to biosignature scans. Multi-agency oversight mandatory. A beginning. Later, Amara walked through a DHS annex. Old posters on the wall. Below them, new sketches. Wildlife Intel and Biosecurity Unit, K9 Task Force. Clinical title. But it meant every creature lost because no one checked might be the last. "Agent Reyes." A man approached Director Shaw. "We'd like you to join the K9 Handler Reform Panel." Amara blinked. You want me to train them? No. Help design how they think. That night, she stood in the old training yard, empty now. Mika walked beside her. You believe in this? Amara asked. I believe in you, Mika said. Amara looked away, not out of pride, but from the ache that comes when someone believes in you before you believe in yourself. A letter came from Geneva, Interpol, an invitation to speak at the Global Trafficking Summit, not just on what happened, but why it was allowed. She set it down, reached for Koda's new harness stitched in silver thread. Let's get to work, she whispered. He stood, not out of command, but because he understood. Days later, an envelope arrived from DHS. Inside, 2 papers. A formal commendation. Agent Amara Reyes, for courage and restraint during Operation Snowveal, for prioritizing all lives, human and non-human. A K-9 operative update. Coda, Unit 47 K-9F, Handler, Reyes, A. Notes read, Instincts override systems. Deviation from training resulted in positive intervention. Recommended, trust-based framework for elite K-9s. No medals, no ribbon, just the truth. Coda had felt something no scanner could see. That night, Amara sat on her fire escape, Coda beside her. The same sky he'd once sniffed bombs under. Now just stillness and steel. She looked down at him. They'll try to explain you in reports. Coda blinked slowly. Tail thumped once, as if to say, don't bother. Later she opened his updated DHS file. Under handler notes, someone had added, This K-9 unit responds to silence like it's a language. Intuitive tracking, independent risk assessment. Recommend observation, not correction. She added her own line. He doesn't follow. He listens. And sometimes, that's more than enough. The system auto-saved. Outside, the wind had picked up, scattering flurries across the dark pavement like ghosts of everything they'd just been through. The chaos had passed, but its weight still lingered in the air. Too quiet. Too still. Coda stretched slowly beside her, joints cracking with the kind of tired only purpose could cause. He lowered himself onto the ground, then gently rested his heavy head on the toe of her boot. It wasn't a gesture for affection. It was something deeper, a confirmation. They'd made it, together. Amara didn't speak. She didn't need to. There were no crowds now, no media, no eyes waiting to assign glory or blame, just the hum of a distant generator and the low rhythm of 2 heartbeats sinking in the cold. No orders, no spotlight, no finish line. Just a woman and her dog still breathing, still here held together by something no rank or medal could name. She reached down slowly, fingers brushing the thick fur between his ears. His tail thumped once against the ground, lazy and content. That was all the answer she needed. In that moment, Amara realized something simple but absolute. The world would never fully understand what had happened. But he would. And somehow, that was enough. Snow whispered against the windshield like a memory too shy to speak aloud. Amara drove slowly, wipers sweeping gently, tires humming over salted asphalt, headlights catching flurries in the air like ghosts passing through light. Coda lay curled in the back seat, not asleep, not alert, just present. That was the thing about him. He didn't have to look at her for her to feel him. He didn't have to speak, didn't whine or pant or shift nervously. He just was. And tonight, that was everything. The dashboard clock ticked past midnight. Outside, the city blurred into gray warehouse rooftops layered in powder, alleys tucked under frost. The world looked cleaner in snow, like it was trying to apologize for what had happened hours earlier. Amara's side still ached where the impact from the crate had caught her ribs. The bruise was deep and purpling. But it wasn't the pain that kept her breath shallow. It was what lingered behind it. Her voice was quiet, almost a whisper. "You knew." The words hung in the space between them. No radio, no other sound but the heater's hush. "You knew before I did, before the scanners, before the protocol, before me." She risked a glance in the rearview mirror. Coda met her eyes, calm, unwavering, as if to say, "I didn't need proof. I needed you to trust me." And she had. Barely. But she had. She turned back to the road. Snow thickened, clung to the corners of the windshield. Her fingers flexed against the steering wheel, aching from where she'd gripped it too tightly during the chase. Amara didn't often let herself reflect mid-mission. There wasn't time for philosophy when lives hung in the balance. But tonight had tilted something. "People think we train you to obey," she murmured, voice steady despite the tremor behind it. "But no one talks about what happens when you decide not to, when your instinct says something different." She gave a half laugh. Sad, grateful, tired. "You broke rank today, and you saved everyone." Another silence. Another shared breath. "He knew when no one else did," she whispered, this time not to him, but for him. Like a statement she needed the universe to record. The highway emptied as they neared the forest road leading home. Pine trees dusted in white lined the shoulder, stoic, ancient. The kind of silence that didn't ask for explanation, just presence. She felt her chest unclench for the first time in hours, not because the mission was over, but because he was here. At a red light, Amara looked down at her gloved hands. So many choices, risks, calculations, split-second calls that could have ended differently. And yet the turning point wasn't hers. It was his. A soft shuffle in the back seat. She turned slightly. Coda had lifted his head, eyes still on her. No bark, no movement. Just watching. Always watching. Her protector. Her shadow. Her proof that instinct, when trusted, could cut through protocol and save lives. They drove on. The snow grew heavier, but she didn't speed up. Some rides aren't meant to be rushed. Some moments require the kind of stillness that only trust can hold. And inside that car fog on the glass, warmth rising from the vents, a heartbeat steady behind her, Amara realized. She was no longer alone in the way that used to haunt her. Coda lay his head back down but kept his eyes open, and she kept driving. 2 survivors, 1 language, no words, just breath. The bell above the diner's door gave a soft jingle, swallowed quickly by the clink of silverware and low hum of a late-night radio station. Amara stepped in first, shoulders heavy under her coat, boots dusted with snow. Coda padded silently behind her, his paw prints melting into the tile like they didn't want to be remembered. The place was mostly empty. 2 truckers at the counter, a waitress refilling coffee with the kind of grace that only comes with exhaustion, and a family of 3 finishing pie in the back booth. Everything smelled like grease, coffee, and something familiar, something safe. Amara exhaled, finally. They slid into a corner booth. Coda curled beside her before she even sat. His hips lowered with a soft grunt. The bandage near his shoulder tugged slightly, But he made no sound of complaint, just settled in. One paw crossed over the other, watchful, tired. The waitress approached with a small smile. "Heard you were coming?" she said gently. "Someone called ahead." Amara looked up, startled. "Not the press, just folks who care," the woman added, setting down a glass of water. "This one's on us. You and the boy deserve it." Amara didn't argue. She just nodded once. "One steak," she said. "Biggest you've got. Medium rare for him." The waitress glanced at Coda. "Hero's cut coming right up." When the plate arrived, it was obscene. Thick, juicy, charred just enough. Amara slid it toward the edge of the table and lowered the dish to the floor like it was sacred. Coda blinked once, sniffed it, then looked at her for permission. She smiled through a quiet ache in her chest. "Go ahead." He leaned in, teeth sinking into the meat with reverence more than hunger. No growling, no urgency, just gratitude in every methodical chew. A couple of the locals clapped softly. One of the truckers raised his mug in salute. No one interrupted. No one asked for photos. Even in admiration there was respect. Amara leaned back, letting the vinyl booth catch her weight. She rolled her shoulder, wincing. The bruise on her side had deepened, its heat a dull reminder that some costs don't show up on reports. Her eyes wandered out the window. Snowflakes smeared across the glass, blurring the gas station lights across the street. Everything felt slower now, like time had exhaled with them. For the first time in days, her hands weren't clenched. She wasn't waiting for the next alert, the next signal, the next suitcase that might hold something breathing or broken. Coda finished half the steak, then licked the edge of the plate, tail thumping once. He shifted, rising just enough to press his head against her thigh before resting it there fully. His tail wagged again barely. Amara laid a hand on his head, her fingers sliding through his fur. Neither of them said a word. But something passed between them. Something quiet, immovable. Not just pride. Not even relief. It was something older, like they both knew. Without saying it, that the story could have ended very differently. That maybe it was supposed to. But it hadn't. Because of him. Someone approached the booth, an elderly woman in a red coat with soft eyes. She didn't speak, just set a tiny bouquet of wrapped daisies on the table, then nodded and walked out. Amara stared after her, throat tight. A flower for a funeral that didn't happen. A silent thank you for something they couldn't begin to understand, but felt. Later, the waitress returned with a brown paper bag. "Last slice of apple pie," she said. "Warm, for the road. Unless—" She looked at Coda, then back at Amara. Amara smiled. "He's had his glory. I'll take this one." The bell jingled again as they left. Snow had lightened to a soft drift. Coda walked slower now, full, satisfied. His breath made little clouds in the cold air. Amara opened the car door, and he jumped in with a soft whoof, turning once before settling. She paused at the driver's side, looking back at the diner still lit, still humming with quiet life. Not a finish line, just a pause. A moment to feel the weight of what they'd carried, what they'd stopped, what they now had to live after. Inside the car, Coda curled up again, head on pause, eyes watching her, and Amara, hand still on the ignition, whispered, "You earned every bite, partner." Then she turned the key, and the night carried them home. The snow had softened into a hush that blanketed everything. No sirens, no radios crackling, no distant airport tannoys breaking through the stillness, just the gentle crunch of boots against frost and the whisper of paw prints pressed beside them. Amara and Coda walked along the narrow trail behind her house, past the old fence, toward the ridge where the town lights dissolved into horizon. It was a place she hadn't visited in years. Too quiet, too removed. But tonight, it felt right. Her coat was zipped high. The collar bristled with each breath. One hand in her pocket, the other resting on the back of Coda's neck as they moved in tandem. Like one body. The moon was high, pale and distant, casting long shadows that swayed with the trees. Coda walked close but not pressed, alert but at ease. His gait was slower now, almost thoughtful. Tail low, ears relaxed. The kind of peace she'd only ever seen after a storm passed, when the worst was over and both man and animal finally believed it. They reached the clearing. A bench, half buried under snow, overlooked the valley. On clear nights you could see the outline of the river and the faint blinking lights of cargo trains slipping past towns that never made the map. Amara didn't sit. She stood for a moment, staring out into that pale, breathless distance. Then she knelt beside him. Coda sat with her, the snow collecting gently on his back. And for a while, neither of them moved. Her voice came low, almost a breath. Not for the world, not for the news, not even for herself. Just for him. No machines could have found what you did. No protocol, no algorithm, no checklist. She looked at him. His fur caught the light like silver. You saved the world, in your way. Coda tilted his head, as if sensing something beyond words. His ears twitched. Then he met her eyes fully. Not in obedience, not waiting for a cue, just presence, deep, knowing. As if to say, I was never guessing. I just knew. That look steady, unwavering, laced with something wordless, settled into her chest with a finality that no award, no headline could match. Not every hero wears a badge. Some just are. She reached out, resting her hand over his heart, felt the warmth, the pulse beneath fur. A heartbeat that had outmatched sensors, a loyalty that had overridden doubt, a soul in its own right. The wind picked up, scattering dry snow into the air like ash or memory, and together woman and dog stood, turned, and walked, back toward the tree line, toward the quiet hum of a house with no alarms tonight, toward a tomorrow that would be quieter, yes, but never the same. Because now, the world knew what she had always known, that some partners don't need words, only trust. Coda glanced up once more as they walked, his breath puffing clouds, his steps even. She looked down, a smile tugging at her lip. "Come on," she whispered. "We've earned home." And under falling snow, two silhouettes, one upright, one four-legged, faded into the blue twilight together, unbroken, unspoken, unforgettable. In a world often clouded by noise, chaos, and greed, stories like Coda's remind us where true clarity lies, in instinct, loyalty, and the quiet courage of those who serve without expectation. German shepherds like Coda are more than working dogs. They are partners, protectors, and silent healers. Their unwavering commitment speaks a language deeper than words, one of trust, empathy, and unconditional love. This story isn't just about crime or justice. It's about the bond between human and animal, the lives saved because someone listened to more than data, and the moments of light found in even the darkest corridors. Coda's legacy is not medals or headlines. It's the ripple of compassion that follows his every step. Let it remind us to cherish and protect the voiceless, to recognize value beyond what can be bought or sold, and to honor those who, like Coda, stand between harm and hope, not for praise, but because it's simply who they are. If we carry even a fraction of that devotion forward in how we treat animals, each other, and the planet, we've already begun writing a better future, one paw print at a time.